The phone buzzed beside a half-empty coffee mug and a messy pile of tax forms I'd put off for too long. It was late, sometime past midnight, but the ceiling fan hummed like it always did, steady and indifferent. The room was dim except for the harsh light from my laptop screen and the occasional reflection bouncing off the stainless steel edge of my desk lamp. I wasn't expecting anything. No calls, no drama, just numbers and overdue forms. Then the message lit up the screen. Just married your wife. You're pathetic. Silas. My brother. I stared at it, letting the silence stretch out like a rope being pulled at both ends. I didn't blink. Didn't even breathe for a second. The only movement was the gentle spin of the fan blades above and the soft tap of a droplet of condensation sliding down my glass. I didn't scream. Didn't throw the phone. I just typed one word. Cool. It wasn't for him. It was for me. If I screamed, he'd win. If I showed I cared, I'd give him what he wanted. No, not tonight. Funny thing about betrayal, it doesn't arrive with noise. It walks in like it owns the place. They say blood is thicker than water, but betrayal cuts through both. I sat back, the leather of my chair creaking just enough to remind me I was still here. Still alive. I let my eyes close for a second, hearing my father's voice in my head, soft, sharp. A real man doesn't raise his voice. He raises his value. I remembered growing up always standing in Silas's shadow. He was louder, slicker, knew how to work a room. I was the one who stayed quiet, did my work, followed the rules, and somehow, that made me the fool. My last conversation with Jessica played in my head like a tape that never quite finishes. Her cold tone, that phrase, I just need space. She said it like she was asking for air, not a divorce. Turns out she didn't need space. She needed a stage. People don't chase love. They chase validation. She didn't want honesty. She wanted applause. And Silas, he always needed an audience. I wasn't going to beg. Not them. Not anyone. I stood up. The house was quiet. Suburban silence. I walked to the study and opened the bottom drawer of my father's old desk. Dark wood, always smelled like dust and old books. Inside were the bank documents Jessica and I signed together 2 years ago when we bought this house. I froze the joint credit card accounts with a click and a password. Then I went to the front door, replaced the locks. New keys, fresh click, and a strange sense of clarity. Control isn't loud, it's precise. Anger fades, logic doesn't. I looked at the wedding photo hanging above the fireplace. We were smiling. She wore blue, not white, said it made her feel less traditional. Silas was there that day, grinning, arm around my shoulder, calling me lucky. I stared at that photo like it was a stranger. Then I took it down, didn't break it, didn't toss it. Just placed it face down in the hallway closet. I poured myself black coffee. No whiskey. Pain doesn't need to be drowned. It needs to be understood. I opened my phone again and stared at our old thread. Scrolled through birthdays, dinners, dumb jokes. None of it mattered anymore. I hit delete, watched it vanish. They didn't just cheat on a man, they cheated on years of loyalty. That's what burned. I finished my coffee and turned off the lights. Slipped into bed with no intention of dreaming. Just rest. Just stillness. A doorbell rang the next morning. I didn't move. Let it ring. Let them wait. Silence has a cost. Then I heard it. Sirens. Not in the distance. Right outside. Loud. Urgent. Tires stopping hard on gravel. Radios buzzing. And then, my name. Called out clear, firm, official. Morning light slid in through the blinds like a slow warning. I was halfway between sleep and thought when the pounding started. Firm, rhythmic, not neighborly. I sat up, reached for the same coffee cup from last night, still half full, cold now. The knock came again. Harder. I opened the door to 2 officers. Clean uniforms, neutral expressions, hands near their belts, but not yet threatening. Are you Mr. Colden Reese? The taller one asked it like he'd asked it 100 times. I nodded once. We're here regarding a complaint filed this morning. Your brother and your ex-wife, he glanced at his notepad, have alleged unauthorized financial interference. I held the door open and motioned them inside. You want coffee? I asked, more out of habit than hospitality. They declined. We stood in my living room, everything neat, lined up, nothing broken. I answered their questions simply, no embellishment, no excuses, just facts. Let them record it all. Funny how justice always knocks when truth is still sleeping. The shorter officer made a few more notes, warned me that the bank might be in touch, then handed me a card. If you're contacted, don't respond directly. Let your counsel handle it, he said. They left like they came. Professional, dispassionate, unaware they'd just lit a fuse. I locked the door and poured a new cup of coffee. Same bitterness, different day. People like Silas, they don't lash out when they win. They lash out when they lose control. I called my lawyer, told him what happened, kept my voice level. Let's keep everything in writing from here on out, I said. He agreed. Then came the memory. 7 years back, when Dad passed and Silas tried to carve out more than his share of the estate. Told Mom it was what Dad wanted, forged a signature, tried to pin it on me when it got messy. I stayed quiet back then, cleaned up the fallout without saying a word. Never again. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I'd heard Maya Angelou say that in an interview once. I didn't get it then. I do now. I grabbed my jacket. Time to visit the bank. The drive was short, familiar roads, a different mindset. At the counter, the teller recognized me, smiled, then looked over her shoulder. I'm sorry, Mr. Reese. Your accounts are temporarily frozen. Investigation pending. My jaw didn't clench. My voice didn't rise. I see, I said. Can you confirm when the freeze was initiated? She hesitated. This morning, your brother called first thing. He sounded frantic. I smiled. Small. Tight. He'll sound worse by noon. I asked to review the joint account logs. Every transfer, every signature. The manager brought out the printouts. Every move I made. Legal. Documented. Dated. I remembered the night I sat Silas down to teach him how credit works. He didn't listen then either. I left the bank calm. And that calm, it rattled people more than any outburst could. Back in my car, alone, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Not anger, not yet. Just a quiet sort of grief. Grief for how easy it had all been to predict. The first time Jessica met Silas, I felt something shift. My gut told me to watch. I didn't. You can't keep peace with people who profit from your silence. The radio played something old, Johnny Cash singing about mistakes that haunt you. I let it play. And then my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Voicemail. I hit play. Mr. Reese, it's Amanda from Ridgeview Bank. Someone's trying to access your late father's trust account. You should come fast. I stared through the windshield for a beat. So, it begins, I muttered. I adjusted the rearview mirror. My reflection didn't look angry, just focused. The kind of focus that comes when you finally stop pretending things will fix themselves. I drove up the long gravel driveway, feeling that same weight in my stomach I used to feel as a kid returning home. The house stood in worn dignity, a Victorian shell with chipped paint, sagging gutters, windows clouded by age. It once felt like safety. Now it felt like accusation. Mom greeted me on the porch, arms open but hesitant, her smile tight. She gave me a perfunctory hug. I noticed the almost mechanical way she stepped back. She still sets the thermostat low, as though Dad is somewhere pacing these halls judging. Inside, the living room smelled of old books and dust. The desk Dad built sat at the back wall, papers stacked neatly on its surface. It looked too clean, like someone expected me. Funny how the past always knows the exact time to stand in the middle of your present. I moved to the study, heart thudding. I pulled open a drawer containing trust documents. One file was a digital copy. I compared it to the copy I'd kept on a secured USB drive. The signature line looked off, pixels mashed, edges too sharp. I opened metadata. It showed modifications made 2 months ago. Silas's hand in the ledger, routing numbers shifted. A joint account linking my mother. My phone trembled as I took photos. I didn't shout. I didn't drop the papers. I captured evidence. I walked into the kitchen where Mom poured coffee like nothing was wrong. You always make things harder than they need to be, Colden, she said, eyes not meeting mine. I asked quietly, like a man threading a needle. How long have you known Silas was pulling from the estate files? She froze. The coffee dripped. She finally muttered, "It's family money. Sometimes you act like you deserve more than others." That sentence echoed louder than any fight. I realized in that moment she never swung the knife, but she set the table. In the cool air of the kitchen, betrayal felt sharper. I left the room, walked outside to call my lawyer. "I found forged trust documents," I told him, voice tight. "We don't move yet. Let him think he's safe." Then we flipped the board. He advised patience. I agreed. I wandered the grounds, Dad's overgrown garden, his tools rusting. He planted things that couldn't withstand the cold, so his rules withered too. I whispered to myself, I'm not here to salvage the past. I'm here to end its hold. As I turned back toward the house, I heard voices just past the window. Silas on speaker. "Mom, he'll figure it out soon. Stall him if he asks." Her voice. "He already did. He's not naive, but don't worry, he's not dangerous." I stepped away, expression unreadable. In my head, they keep confusing silence with surrender. That's their final mistake. Late afternoon light filtered through the curtains of the old dining room as I stepped inside. The room hadn't changed. Same polished oak table, same chandelier that never hung quite straight. But the air felt different, like a stage waiting for its final scene. Verna sat at one end, her posture rehearsed, a neutral smile plastered on. Cold-cut sandwiches sat untouched on silver platters. Not a meal, just a prop. Silas had taken the head of the table like he owned it. Darian was across from him, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "We need to discuss what's happening," Verna began, voice smooth but stiff. Not an invitation, a performance. I took a seat slowly. I didn't speak. I listened. The power is always with the quiet one in the room. Verna nodded toward a man I hadn't seen in years, Martin Lynch, one of my father's old estate lawyers. He stood, opened a leather binder, and cleared his throat. "There's been a formal update to the family trust," he said. "Based on verified original documentation, Colden Reese is now the sole legal heir to the estate and all trust assets." The silence was deafening. Silas's jaw tightened so hard I heard the crack of his molars. Darian's eyes widened, flicking from the lawyer to her husband. Verna's mouth opened, then shut like she forgot how air worked. "That can't be," she whispered. "We never—" "No," I said calmly. "You never signed that change. Silas did. Forged it, actually, along with some interesting edits to routing numbers." Darian gasped. It wasn't just shock, it was realization. Betrayal wasn't abstract anymore. It had dollar signs and dates now. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I looked at all of them and said, "Truth doesn't need defense. Lies need armies." Martin laid out more documents, bank records, metadata, flagged activity. The paper trail didn't lie. Silas had tried to scrub the past, but the ink still bled. "The bank has frozen access to joint accounts tied to the trust," Martin continued. "Pending full investigation." Silas leaned forward, face red. "You manipulated this too." I met his glare. "I don't need to manipulate what I never gave up." Verna's hands trembled. Her polished poise cracked at the edges. She looked between us like a woman realizing she'd backed the wrong horse. The room snapped. Silas shoved his chair back and stormed out, muttering something I didn't bother decoding. Darian followed, her heels echoing off the floor like punctuation marks in a closing statement. Verna stayed seated. Shoulders sagged, eyes wet, not from guilt, but something closer to surrender. I stood and walked over. "You watched him erase me," I said, not raising my voice. "Why?" She looked down. "He promised stability. You were always unpredictable." That hit harder than anything Silas had done. That was the voice of every moment I was told I was too much, too quiet, too methodical, too anything. "Predictable isn't weak," I said. "It's trustworthy." She didn't argue. She didn't apologize. Just looked away. That was her truth. I turned from her and walked toward the hallway, the clink of ice settling in untouched glasses behind me. My phone buzzed as I stepped into the corridor. A text. Talia. I hadn't seen that name in years. "You're not alone. We're ready when you say so." I looked back at the empty dining room, once a place of family, now a battlefield with no winners. They thought I'd been fighting alone. They were wrong. The flyer came folded neatly in an unmarked envelope. Family Prayer Night in Support of New Beginnings. The handwriting wasn't signed, but I didn't need a name. My mother's attempts at peace always came dressed in something polite, something holy. The church sat on the edge of town, small and whitewashed, the kind of place that smelled like old hymn books and dusted lilies. By the time I arrived, the parking lot was full. I walked in, and every conversation seemed to dim by half a note. Familiar faces, neighbors, old family friends, even some who'd whispered about me since the estate ordeal, turned to look. I took a seat in the back pew. The pastor stood tall, warm-voiced, reading from Matthew about forgiveness, about laying down the weight of material burdens. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family didn't want forgiveness. They wanted forgetfulness. Verna sat in the front row, pearls around her neck, back straight as scripture. When she spoke, her tone was soft, rehearsed. Family must find its way back to one another. No one wins when bitterness leads the way. I could feel Silas's smirk 2 rows ahead. He thrived on this, being the center of redemption he never earned. I leaned forward, elbows on knees, watching the dust dance in the sunlight slicing through stained glass. Forgiveness isn't amnesia, I thought. It's choosing memory without surrender. When the service ended, people moved toward coffee and polite chatter. I headed for the exit, ready to leave the show behind. But Darian was waiting in the hallway, eyes red, clutching her coat too tight. "Colden," she said, voice breaking slightly. I stopped, hands in pockets. "You shouldn't be here." "I didn't know about the trust," she said quickly. "Not all of it. Silas. He told me it was settled years ago." I looked at her, calm but detached. "You didn't ask questions. That's the same as knowing." She stepped closer. "I thought you'd moved on." "You were always so distant, so quiet," I finished for her. "Distance isn't disinterest. But betrayal, that's always deliberate." Tears welled, but I didn't flinch. She reached for my arm. I took a small step back. Not out of cruelty, out of finality. Some relationships don't end with shouting. They die in silence long before the truth catches up. This was one of them. She whispered, "I'm sorry." I nodded once, then let it stay said. As she turned away, I noticed the parking lot lights flickering on, casting long shadows across the gravel. The church doors creaked open behind me. I could hear murmurs, the low hum of gossip finding its rhythm. I turned back inside. If they wanted a spectacle, I'd give them clarity instead. The pastor was still near the pulpit, speaking to Verna and a few members. I walked straight to the front. The room hushed. Every eye followed. "Since tonight's about healing," I said, my voice steady, carrying through the room, "let's start with truth." The pastor shifted uneasily. "Mr. Reese, perhaps this isn't—" I raised a hand slightly. "I'll be brief." I spoke plainly. No names, no theatrics, just facts, forged signatures, manipulated accounts, lies dressed as concern. I didn't accuse, I revealed. Whispers filled the pews. Verna's composure cracked. Silas stiffened like a man waiting for lightning to strike. I ended simply, "If your peace depends on my silence, then you never deserved my presence." And then I walked out. The sound of whispers followed me into the night, half outrage, half respect. The kind of silence that means people have finally seen something they can't unsee. The cold air outside bit against my face. The street empty except for a flickering lamppost and the echo of my own footsteps. I didn't feel anger, just clarity. They always wanted me quiet. Not because I was wrong, but because memory makes noise. I remembered everything. The looks, the schemes, the way my father's voice once said I was too soft to carry the name. Soft men bend, I thought. Strong ones endure. I reached my car, keys in hand, when I noticed movement near the edge of the lot. A figure stepped from the dark, coat pulled tight against the wind. "Talia?" I asked. She nodded, her expression unreadable under the yellow light. "I have something that will change everything," she said quietly. "You were right all along." I didn't react, just met her gaze. "Show me." She glanced around before whispering, "Not here. Follow me." And for the first time in weeks, I felt something sharp stir in my chest. Hope, or maybe just the beginning of truth finally turning its face toward me. I closed the door behind me, lights off, blinds drawn. My study felt like a war room tonight. The air hung still, thick with purpose. I gathered the files, trust docs, timestamps, the rough copies I'd hidden months ago, every shred of betrayal laid bare. My phone buzzed. Talia, check company ledger tonight. I opened server logs for Silas's firm. My chest tightened. There it was. Payments routed into shell accounts, flows that didn't match contracts or invoices. They built a fortress of lies. Tonight, it crumbles. I backed everything up, encrypted, duplicated. This evidence was my sword and shield. I drove downtown under twilight, lights flickering between gold and gray. The building loomed, a sleek facade worn with hidden rust. I pressed the buzzer. Inside, surprised faces. Executives who once smirked at my invisibility now sat in front of me. I stood before them. I need access to all company accounts. I didn't ask, I demanded. They hesitated. Then I unloaded. I presented the evidence, how estate trust dollars were funneled into Silas's companies, masked as loans, hidden as acquisitions. His empire built on my inheritance. Gasps. Some swiveled in chairs. Silas went pale beside the glass wall. You used my family's trust to build your reputation. That ends today. Security appeared at the door, but I didn't flinch. Let them in. No theatrics. Only truth. I watched as partner after partner backed away. Accounts froze. Relations severed. Suddenly, Martin, the lawyer, stepped in with the original will. Dad's true document. It confirmed what I already knew. I was always the heir. Silas's facade faltered. Verna's eyes widened. Darian burst through the door, disbelief etched on her face. I remained calm. You fought shadows pretending to be power, but truth was never hidden. Some executives turned to me. Others just stared. The room split. Silas, now alone, threatened countersuit, but his threats echoed in an empty court. I slipped out the back door, leaving chaos behind. Outside, I leaned against my car, breathing deep. They lost not because I attacked them. They lost because I refused to be erased. Dad used to say, integrity is what you do when no one's watching. Tonight, everyone saw. I unclenched my fists. Vengeance is wasted. Justice lasts. I called Talia, my voice low. It's done. Now prepare for the fall. As I hung up, my phone lit up with alerts. Breaking. Silas Creed accused of multi-million-dollar embezzlement in estate filings. I stared into that glow. They thought freezing me would silence me. They froze themselves instead. The sun dipped behind the hills as I pulled into the lot. I parked far from the main entrance under a tree where the light didn't reach. My suit was simple. Clean lines, dark gray, no tie. I adjusted the collar, straightened my cuffs, and walked toward the venue. Same chapel grounds they used the first time. This time, they upgraded the flowers, but not the truth. The arch at the front was heavy with lilies and silk. Cars packed the lot. Familiar names, familiar faces. The ones who'd whispered, watched, but never warned. I walked through the side entrance. No one noticed at first. Inside, music drifted from the piano. Guests shifted in pews. Darian, in white. Silas, smug in silence. The air was thick with showmanship. But not a soul breathed ease. I didn't sit in front. Didn't want the spotlight. I found a seat in the back corner. Enough to see. Not enough to be seen. At least not yet. Verna's eyes swept the crowd, paused and froze when she saw me. She stiffened, said nothing, but I felt it. The moment her spine remembered guilt, the ceremony rolled on, rehearsed and hollow, until the words came, "Who gives this woman?" I stood. No one spoke. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just stood still and sure, like a shadow turned solid. Heads turned. Gasps spread like sparks. The pianist missed a note. Darian looked straight at me, confused, hesitant. Silas twitched, unsure whether to fake a smile or call security. I said one thing, slow and clear. Truth doesn't need an invitation. Then I turned and walked out. Nothing else. No drama. Just presence. The kind they never counted on. Outside, the air hit cooler. Night was stretching its legs. That's when I saw him. Reuben. He was leaning against a pillar near the side lot, fidgeting but waiting. He handed me a flash drive, his eyes down. I couldn't carry it anymore, he said. It's all there. Recordings, messages. You weren't wrong, Em. You were erased. I slid the drive into my phone and tapped play. There it was, Silas, on audio, bragging. He won't fight, never has. His own mama helped me sign half that junk. I looked up. Reuben's hands were shaking. I worked for him 10 years. I stayed silent because I needed the job, but I kept the truth. And tonight, I brought it. I nodded. You just stood taller than most of that room ever will. Inside, murmurs had risen. Doors cracked open. Some guests spilling out to follow what just happened. I didn't go back in. I didn't need to. I walked toward the drive, heart steady. The only thing louder than that flash drive was my own heartbeat. Slow, even, alive. At the edge of the parking lot, my phone lit up again. Group message pinged. One word, exposed. Attached was a screenshot from the live feed. Verna's name on the forged trust doc. Clear, confirmed, public. I replied with one line. Guess silence never suited me. Behind me, the lights inside flickered. Voices rose. A wedding undone not by noise, but by one man standing still. Morning came heavy with noise. I woke to the sound of engines outside, cameras clicking, voices calling my name through the gate. The news vans lined the road like vultures. On every channel, the same headline rolled, Creed estate implodes, forgery, fraud, family betrayal. I stood at the window, coffee in hand, watching them through the haze of steam. Someone had leaked everything, the forged documents, the recordings, even Silas's confession. Probably Reuben. I didn't mind. Truth had finally learned how to speak louder than money. On TV, Silas's face flashed across the screen, mid-laugh, mid-lie. He looked untouchable. Now he looked small. I sat down on the porch, the mug warm between my palms. For the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. Just done. Done watching them twist decency into theater. I whispered to myself, truth was slow, but it never missed its mark. By noon, I was in my car headed to the courthouse. Reporters swarmed the steps like hornets. Flashes stung my eyes, but I kept my gaze low, walking straight through the crowd. Verna was already inside, surrounded by her lawyers, the same ones who'd once helped her bury my father's will. The judge entered. Everyone rose. When he spoke, his tone carried that kind of authority that cut through air. Verna's defense tried to push dismissal. The judge shook his head before they even finished. Then came the hammer blow, evidence of an offshore account tied directly to the trust she'd helped siphon. Her face cracked, the same face that never flinched when she lied to me. The prosecutor's words kept rolling, detailing every wire transfer, every false signature, every lie she'd told to keep the family crown intact. When the bailiffs approached her with cuffs, she screamed, "This was never supposed to happen!" Her voice filled the chamber, hollow and desperate. I turned just once. "But it was always going to," I said quietly. The cuffs clicked. Cameras flashed. The queen of the Creed family, undone in her own courtroom. Outside, the press swarmed again, shouting questions that didn't matter. I ignored them. That's when Talia stepped forward, unexpected, steady. She asked for the mic at the podium. The judge allowed it. She looked right into the cameras, not to me. "I was part of Silas's company," she said. "I knew pieces of it, but I didn't see the full picture until I heard him speak about destroying his brother." Her hands trembled. When I saw Colden stand up, when I heard him talk about dignity, I realized who'd really been betrayed. Her voice broke, but she didn't stop. He didn't fight for revenge. He fought because silence had gone on too long. We all let it. The crowd fell quiet. No jeers, no noise, just a shift. A subtle but heavy shift. For the first time, people weren't looking at me as a bitter man chasing ghosts. They saw what I'd been fighting for. Truth without theater. By evening, the courthouse was empty. Silas had withdrawn from his board. Darian was gone. No forwarding address. And the estate, by law, was mine again. I didn't celebrate. I just drove back to the old house. The grass had swallowed the driveway. Paint peeled from the porch rails. The air smelled like dust and time. Inside, every room was a monument to things unspoken. My father's desk still sat where I'd last seen it, the same one where he'd signed away affection for order. I walked through the hall and stopped in the middle where laughter used to echo. I could almost see the shadows of our younger selves, before greed and fear hollowed the walls. Closure doesn't rebuild, it releases. I stood there until the sun began to fade, then turned toward the door. On the porch, a small envelope waited. No stamp, just my name written in a shaky hand. Inside, a letter. I'm sorry, I was weak. You weren't. Signed, Darian. I read it twice. No tears, no relief. Just a deep breath and a weight lifting, quiet and invisible. I folded it, slid it into my coat, and stepped out into the evening air. The empire had fallen, the noise had stopped, and all that was left was peace. I sat on the porch with Darian's letter open on my lap, wind stirring loose pages and salt air mixing with memory. I read that line again. I didn't know how broken we were until you walked away from the fire. And felt its weight differently this time. Doubt had softened. Maybe regret had sharpened. I didn't know if I believed him, but I felt something real in the silence that followed. Gravel cracked behind me. Darian appeared at the edge of the path, quiet, cautious. He didn't rush forward. He just stood, letting the years settle between us. I nodded. He came closer, sat on the step beside me. The light was low, the sea a muted promise beyond us. He looked at the horizon. I never realized how much we lost until it had nothing left, he said, voice low and raw. No excuses, no pleas, just truth. I swallowed hard and said thank you. That matters. He rose slowly and walked away. No turning back, no dramatic last line. Just an ending we both understood. Days later, I signed papers in a lawyer's office. The estate was mine legally, but I declined. Instead, I turned it into a trust for women rebuilding from abuse. The same land that had held betrayal would now nurture healing. When the press pressed me, I said it was never about regaining land, it was about reclaiming peace. Over the months, old signs came down. New ones went up. Creed Haven, Women's Retreat. Hallways once hushed with fear, now echoed with laughter. I visited sometimes, not as owner, not as hero, but as someone who understood second chances. I left the city behind, moved near the coast, and took a modest job at a non-profit law clinic. Nobody there knew my name. I liked it that way. In helping others reclaim their lives, I found pieces of mine I'd thought lost. I began writing, not a memoir, but a map. How to live after betrayal. Life became simple, not flawless, but mine. I smiled more, because I'd stopped chasing silence. Verna served her time. Silas moved across state lines, his reputation dark and quiet. Talia transformed her guilt into purpose, mentoring others. Every year she sent me a card. Pieces earned. T. I kept them in a shoebox beneath my bed, next to my father's lighter, unlit. One cool evening, I sat on the porch, tea in hand, watching the sunset burn into the sea. A knock came. I stood and opened the door. A girl, maybe 18, stood there clutching a worn copy of my book. "Are you the one who wrote this?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Yes." She shifted, then sat next to me. The ocean stretched before us, the world quiet. She whispered, "I never thought people like you existed." I turned to her, heart calm. "We do," I said. "We just learned to speak again after silence." The waves rolled steady and sure. The past had receded. A new story was beginning.